Welcome to Quiz Time. I'm your Quizmaster Sean, and I've got 100 questions for you, specifically aimed at baby boomers. Okay, for all of us, but it tests our baby boomer knowledge. Sports, trivia, politics, you name it. Which architect's innovative case study houses of the 1950s revolutionized California residential architecture? I.M. Pei, Richard Neutra, or Frank Lloyd Wright? And that was Richard Neutra. What controversial 1949 book by Simone de Beauvoir became a foundational text of feminist philosophy? The Feminist Mystique, The Second Sex, or Sexual Politics? And the book was The Second Sex. Which 1960s TV show featured a secret agent whose telephone was hidden in his shoe? Mission Impossible, Get Smart, or The Man from U.N.C.L.E.? And that was Get Smart. What domestic kitchen innovation, first marketed in 1961, revolutionized coffee preparation? Was it the percolator, the automatic drip, or Mr. Coffee? It was Mr. Coffee. Which 1950s automobile became famous for its suicide doors that opened from the center? The Cadillac Eldorado, the Lincoln Continental, or the Chevrolet Bel Air? And that would be the Lincoln Continental. What pioneering 1952 medical procedure by Dr. Virginia Apgar created a scoring system still used today? The Apgar score for newborns, the Glasgow Coma Scale, or the cardiac stress test? That would be the Apgar score for newborns. Which 1968 film, directed by Franco Zeffirelli, featured teenage actors in the lead roles of star-crossed lovers? West Side Story, Romeo and Juliet, or A Midsummer Night's Dream? Romeo and Juliet. What cultural movement, beginning in the early 1950s, was characterized by abstract expressionist paintings and experimental jazz? The Harlem Renaissance, the Lost Generation, or the Beat Generation? And that would be the Beat Generation. Which 1960s band was originally called the Gollywogs before changing their name? Was it the Grateful Dead, Jefferson Airplane, or Creedence Clearwater Revival? And that would be Creedence Clearwater Revival. What innovative building material, widely adopted in the 1950s, allowed for large open interior spaces in suburban homes? Poured concrete, post and beam construction, or steel reinforcement? That would be post and beam construction. Which 1950s television comedian's catchphrase was, "How sweet it is"? Sid Caesar, Jackie Gleason, or Milton Berle? How sweet it is. That's the catchphrase of Jackie Gleason. What revolutionary transportation concept was introduced in 1964 between Tokyo and Osaka? Was it the monorail, the bullet train, or the maglev? And that was the bullet train. Which groundbreaking 1967 film featured Sidney Poitier having dinner with his wife, fiancé's parents? In the Heat of the Night, Guess Who's Coming to Dinner, or To Sir with Love? Guess Who's Coming to Dinner. What 1950s consumer product innovation featured the advertising slogan, "Better Living Through Chemistry"? Reynolds Wrap, DuPont Nylon, or Tupperware? If it's chemistry, it's DuPont. DuPont nylon. Which 1960s musician pioneered the use of feedback and distortion as musical techniques? Bob Dylan, Jimi Hendrix, or Eric Clapton? And that would be Jimi Hendrix. What pioneering 1950s technology allowed viewers to watch programs at any time? Was it cable television, the videotape recorder, or closed captioning? And that innovation was the videotape recorder. Which influential 1960s architectural movement was characterized by exposed concrete and brutalist designs? Organic architecture, Art Deco revival, or New Brutalism? That would be New Brutalism. What 1950s children's toy consisted of a plastic potato and various facial features that could be inserted? Play-Doh, Mr. Potato Head, or Tinker Toys? And that would be Mr. Potato Head. Which 1974 film by Francis Ford Coppola continued the saga of the Corleone family? Was it The Conversation, The Godfather Part 2, or Mean Streets? I want that you should pick The Godfather Part 2. What iconic 1950s automotive design feature was inspired by jet aircraft? Was it tail fins, white-walled tires, or chrome bumpers? And that feature was tail fins. Which children's author published Green Eggs and Ham in 1960, using only 50 different words? Was that Roald Dahl, Maurice Sendak, or Dr. Seuss? I like them here or there and anywhere. It's Dr. Seuss. I love Green Eggs and Ham. What 1962 environmental disaster in London killed approximately 4,000 people? Was it the Thames flood, the Great Smog, or the Silvertown explosion? And that was the Great Smog. Which pioneering female aviator set multiple speed records in the 1950s and 1960s? Was it Amelia Earhart, Burl Markham, or Jacqueline Cochran? It was Jacqueline Cochran. What 1950s toy consisted of small plastic bricks that could be connected to build structures? Were those Tinker Toys, Lincoln Logs, or were they Lego? Lego. And if you got them, be sure you wear shoes around them. Which 1967 film starring Warren Beatty and Faye Dunaway glamorized Depression-era bank robbers? Was it The Sting, Bonnie and Clyde, or was it The Wild Bunch? It was Bonnie and Clyde. What revolutionary kitchen appliance introduced in 1952 allowed for the preparation of multiple recipes? Was it the stand mixer, the blender, or the Cuisinart food processor? It was the Cuisinart food processor. Which author's 1953 dystopian novel featured a fireman whose job was to burn books? Aldous Huxley, George Orwell, or Ray Bradbury? And that would be Ray Bradbury. What iconic American highway, established in 1956, connected Chicago to Los Angeles? Highway 1, Route 66, or Interstate 95? And that would be Route 66. Which 1950s musician was known as the Hillbilly Cat before becoming the King? Johnny Cash, Elvis Presley, Or was that Jerry Lee Lewis? That would be Elvis Presley. What innovative 1960s commercial aircraft featured a drooping nose for improved pilot visibility? Was that the Concorde, the Boeing 747, or the Douglas DC-10? A drooping nose. That was the Concorde. Which 1960s television show featured a family who lived at 1313 Mockingbird Lane? Was that the Munsters, the Addams Family, or Dark Shadows? That was the Munsters. Which influential jazz musician pioneered modal jazz with his 1959 album, Kinda Blue? Miles Davis, John Coltrane, or Thelonious Monk? That was Miles Davis. What 1947 invention by Edwin Land allowed for instant photography? Was it the Kodak Brownie, the Polaroid camera, or the Minolta SLR? It was the Polaroid camera. What revolutionary kitchen appliance, introduced in 1967, used electromagnetic waves to heat food? Was it the microwave oven, the pressure cooker, or the convection oven? It was the microwave oven. Which French film director pioneered the New Wave movement with films like The 400 Blows in 1959? Was it François Truffaut, Jean-Luc Godard, or Alain Resnais? It was François Truffaut. What 1950s fashion accessory consisted of a wide, stiff skirt supported by layers of petticoats? Was that the crinoline, the pencil skirt, or the A-line dress? That was the crinoline. Which innovative vehicle, introduced in 1950, combined features of a car and a Jeep? Was it the Land Rover, the Willys Jeepster, or the Volkswagen Thing? That was the Willys Jeepster. What 1967 protest movement attempted to use psychic energy to levitate the Pentagon? Yippies, Weathermen, or Black Panthers? It was the Yippies. Didn't work. Which influential 1950s television show pioneered the use of kinescope recording? Was it The Twilight Zone, I Love Lucy, or Gunsmoke? It was I Love Lucy. What groundbreaking 1959 play by Lorraine Hansberry depicted a black family's experience in Chicago? Was it The Glass Menagerie, The Death of a Salesman, or A Raisin in the Sun? It was A Raisin in the Sun. Which American designer created the ultra suede fabric that revolutionized fashion in the 1970s? Was it Ralph Lauren? Was it Helston? Or was it Calvin Klein? It was Helston. What 1950s audio innovation allowed for stereophonic sound reproduction? Quadraphonic sound, high-fidelity stereo, or 8-track tape? And it was high-fidelity stereo. Which 1964 film, starring Peter Sellers, satirized Cold War nuclear anxiety? Was it The Manchurian Candidate? Was it Dr. Strangelove? Or was it Failsafe? It was Dr. Strangelove. What innovative product introduced in 1958 by NASA had civilian applications including non-stick cookware? Was it Kevlar? Was it Teflon? Or was it Velcro? It was Teflon. Which 1950s automotive safety innovation was first patented by Volvo, but made freely available to all manufacturers? Was it the three-point seatbelt, the crumple zone, or the padded dashboard? It was the three-point seatbelt. What revolutionary medical procedure, first performed successfully in 1967, involved transplanting a human heart? Was it heart transplantation, artificial heart implantation, or bypass surgery? It was heart transplantation. Which 1960s television show featured a family who traveled in a converted school bus named The Ark? Was that the Brady Bunch, the Partridge Family, or was it the Waltons? That was the Partridge Family. What innovative educational toy, introduced in 1952, allowed children to create electronic circuits? Was it Lincoln Logs? Was it the Erector set? Or was it Tinker Toys? That was Erector set. Which pioneering female journalist became the first woman to win a Pulitzer Prize for international reporting in 1951? Was it Marguerite Higgins, Martha Gellhorn, or Dorothy Thompson? And that would be Marguerite Higgins. What groundbreaking 1967 film by Arthur Penn featured extensive graphic violence that changed Hollywood standards? Was it Bonnie and Clyde, The Wild Bunch, or was it Badlands? It was Bonnie and Clyde. Which technological innovation, first demonstrated in 1947, revolutionized electronics with a semiconductor design? Was it the transistor, the vacuum tube, or the integrated circuit? It was the transistor. What revolutionary home entertainment system, introduced in 1972, allowed people to play video games on their televisions? Was it the Magnavox Odyssey? Was it Intellivision? Or was it the Atari 2600? It was the Magnavox Odyssey. Which 1960s folk musician was known as the Voice of Protest and wrote Blown in the Wind? Joan Baez, Pete Seeger, or was it Bob Dylan? The answer, my friend, is Bob Dylan. What innovative American automobile, introduced in 1964, was marketed as a secretary's car but became a sports car phenomenon? The Chevrolet Corvette, the Pontiac GTO, or the Ford Mustang? The Ford Mustang. A secretary's car, eh? Sure. Which influential 1950s artist combined abstract expressionism with elements of Chinese calligraphy? Jackson Pollock, Mark Tobey, or was it Willem de Kooning? It was Mark Tobey. What groundbreaking medical advancement, introduced in 1960, revolutionized women's reproductive control? Was it the oral contraceptive pill, the diaphragm, or was it the IUD? It was the oral contraceptive pill. Which innovative building technique of the 1950s allowed for a rapid construction of suburban houses? Was it the Levittown method, the Usonian design, or was it the post and beam? It was the Levittown method. What revolutionary fashion item, introduced in 1959, transformed women's hosiery? Was it pantyhose? Was it the garter belt? Or was it stockings? Boomers! It was pantyhose! Which 1960s television show featured a family of rural hillbillies who moved to Beverly Hills after finding oil? Was that the Beverly Hillbillies? Was it Green Acres? Or was it Petticoat Junction? It was the Beverly Hillbillies. What innovative home appliance introduced in 1950 used rotating brushes to clean floors? Was that electric floor polishers, upright vacuums, or steam cleaners? Those were electric floor polishers. Which pioneering civil rights activist organized the Montgomery bus boycott in 1955? Was that Malcolm X? Was it Rosa Parks? Or was it Bayard Rustin? That organizer was Rosa Parks. What revolutionary educational program, launched in 1969, was designed to prepare underprivileged children for school? Was it Sesame Street, Schoolhouse Rock, or was it Head Start? Actually, the answer is Head Start. Which influential architect designed the TWA terminal at JFK Airport in 1962, featuring flowing concrete shapes? Was it Eero Saarinen, Frank Lloyd Wright, or Philip Johnson? That would be Eero Saarinen. What innovative computing device, introduced in 1971, was the first pocket calculator? IBM Executive, the Bomar Brain, or the Texas Instruments SR-10? And that would be the Bomar Brain. Which 1950s television show featured a puppet theater and was hosted by Buffalo Bob Smith? Was that Captain Kangaroo, Howdy Doody, or Kukla, Fran, and Ollie? It's Howdy Doody time. What groundbreaking 1970 environmental initiative established the Environmental Protection Agency? The National Environmental Policy Act, the Clean Air Act, or the Wilderness Act? And that would be the National Environmental Policy Act. Which influential 1950s beat poet wrote Howl and faced an obscenity trial for its publication? Allen Ginsberg, William S. Burroughs, or Jack Kerouac? Howl was written by Allen Ginsberg. What innovative kitchen tool, introduced in 1950, used a lever to crush garlic cloves? Was it the mandolin, the garlic press, or the microplane? And that was the garlic press. Which 1960s television show featured a dolphin who could communicate with humans? Was that Lassie, Flipper, or Gentle Ben? His name is Flipper. 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 What revolutionary transportation concept, tested in France in the 1960s, used air cushions to hover above tracks? Was it the monorail, the hovercraft, or the maglev? And that would be the hovercraft. Which influential 1950s science fiction author wrote Childhood's End and 2001: A Space Odyssey? Isaac Asimov, Robert A. Heinlein, or Arthur C. Clarke? Arthur C. Clarke. What innovative building, completed in 1958 in Sydney, Australia, featured a revolutionary shell design? Falling Water, the Sydney Opera House, or the Guggenheim Museum? And that would be the Sydney Opera House. Which 1960s medical advancement involved the first successful transplant of a human organ? Was it an artificial heart, a kidney transplant, or a heart-lung machine? It was a kidney transplant. What revolutionary aircraft, introduced in 1970, was the first wide-body passenger jet? Was it the Douglas DC-10? Was it the Concorde? Or was it the Boeing 747? It was the Boeing 747. Which influential 1960s artist created minimalist sculptures featuring industrial materials? Was it Robert Rauschenberg, Klaus Oldenburg, or Donald Judd? It was Donald Judd. What groundbreaking 1972 educational program featured animated segments on grammar, science, and math? Was it Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood? Was it The Electric Company? Or was it Schoolhouse Rock? Schoolhouse Rock. That's how I know the function of a conjunction. Which pioneering female astronomer discovered pulsars in 1967, but was initially denied recognition? Was it Caroline Herschel, Jocelyn Bell Burnell, or Vera Rubin? It was Jocelyn Bell Burnell. What innovative toy, introduced in 1966, featured colorful pegs that could be placed in a light box? Was that a spirograph? Was it a light bright? Or was it an Etch-a-Sketch? It was a light bright. Which 1950s musical style combined elements of country and rhythm and blues? Is that doo-wop, rockabilly, or folk rock? That was rockabilly. What revolutionary camera, introduced in 1947, used a twin-lens reflex system for professional photography? Was that the Rolleiflex, the Leica M3, or the Hasselblad 500C? That was the Rolleiflex. Which influential 1960s author wrote Trout Fishing in America and In Watermelon Sugar? Was that Ken Kesey, Tom Wolfe, or Richard Brautigan? And that was Richard Brautigan. What innovative kitchen appliance, introduced in 1971, used a slow, low-heat method of cooking? Was that the crock pot, the pressure cooker, or the rice cooker? It was the crock pot. Which 1950s television show featured a talking horse that only one man could hear? Was that Mr. Ed, My Friend Flicka, or National Velvet? And that, of course, was Mr. Ed. What revolutionary fashion item, introduced in 1947, featured a nipped waist and full skirt? Was that the A-line dress, the poodle skirt, or the new look? That was the new look. Which pioneering female journalist became the first female war correspondent during the Korean War? Was that Margaret Burke-White, Martha Gellhorn, or Marguerite Higgins? It was Marguerite Higgins. What innovative building material, widely used in the 1950s, allowed for curved sculptural architectural forms? Was that reinforced concrete, laminated wood, or gunite? It was gunite. Which 1960s musical group featured siblings Richard and Karen Carpenter? Was that the Carpenters, Peter, Paul, and Mary, or the Mamas and the Papas? That was the Carpenters. What groundbreaking medical procedure, first performed in 1954, involved transplanting an organ between identical twins? Was it a kidney transplant, a heart transplant, or a liver transplant? It would have to be a kidney transplant. Which innovative toy, introduced in 1965, allowed children to create designs by inserting colored pegs? Spirograph, Light Bright, or color forms? And that would be the spirograph. What revolutionary aircraft, introduced in 1952, was the first commercial jetliner? Was it a Boeing 707, the de Havilland Comet, or the Douglas DC-8? It was the de Havilland Comet. Which influential 1960s fashion designer popularized the mod style in London? Was that Coco Chanel, Mary Quant, or Yves Saint Laurent? And that would be Mary Quant. What innovative home entertainment device, introduced in 1963, used compact cartridges instead of reel-to-reel tape? Was it the compact cassette, the 8-track, or the reel-to-reel? It was the compact cassette. Which groundbreaking 1957 Broadway musical featured gang warfare between the Jets and the Sharks? Was that The Music Man? Was it My Fair Lady? Or was it West Side Story? It was West Side Story. What revolutionary communication technology, first demonstrated in 1962, used satellites for international telephone calls? Was it Telstar, microwave relay, or transatlantic cable? It was Telstar. Which influential 1950s television show featured an extraterrestrial visitor named Uncle Martin? Was it The Twilight Zone, Lost in Space, or My Favorite Martian? It was My Favorite Martian. What groundbreaking 1973 Supreme Court case established a woman's right to privacy regarding reproductive decisions? Was it Griswold versus Connecticut, the United States versus Nixon, or was it Roe v. Wade? It was Roe v. Wade. Which pioneering female scientist won the Nobel Prize in Chemistry in 1964 for her work on protein structures? Was it Rosalind Franklin, Barbara McClintock, or Dorothy Hodgkin? It was Dorothy Hodgkin. What innovative home entertainment system, introduced in 1965, used cartridges for playing music? Was it the compact cassette, the reel-to-reel, or the 8-track tape? It was the 8-track tape. Which 1950s automotive innovation by Chrysler featured push-button transmission controls? Power steering, power flight, or Hydromatic? It was Power Flight. And now question 100. What revolutionary communication technology, introduced in 1969, connected computers at 4 U.S. universities? Was it the World Wide Web? Was it Ethernet? Or was it ARPANET? It was ARPANET. That's it. That's all I got. You did an amazing job. And don't forget to like, subscribe, ring that notification bell, and share your score in the comments, please. And while you're here, check out these videos. They're a lot of fun to play too. I'll catch you in the next one. Bye-bye.